beautiful Sunday morning, nice and sunny and windy. Not the kind of weather we usually get in Delhi. And I'm so glad to see so many of you are out to enjoy this weather. A few of you attended the program yesterday. We had some amazing sessions. In particular, we had the books to OTT adaptations, where we had so many writers, authors talk about how they're able to adapt books to screenplays to create a major impact on the OTT platforms. There was also polarization, neutrality in the security environment. We had a discussion with Dr. Pavan Verma on the great Hindu civilization. Today also plans to be a very exciting day with many things lined up. Right after this session, we have a motivational talk by Shiv Khera. We will have a panel discussion called We Too, Changing Gender Dynamics. And that's got a very impressive lineup of so many ladies. The Book of Everlasting Things is going to be another one post-lunch with Aanchal Malhotra. If you're all settled in, let's get started with our day today. And to begin with, I'd like to start calling on stage our presenters, our panelists, and our moderators today. The first person that I would like to invite on stage is General Shankar Prasad. He will be moderating our session today on global climate crisis. Do I need to give an introduction? We all know him very well, but you know what? Let's do a little bit of, activity. Rouse ourselves. I'd also like to call on stage Captain Sarabjit Parmar, Mr. Atul Bagai, and Dr. Vibha Dhawan, our esteemed guests for this very important and a relevant session. After all the rabble-rousing of Saturday night, come on, let's just do this right now. Thank you. The climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win, as the Secretary General of the UN pointed out earlier in 2022, September. Rising temperatures are fueling environmental degradation, natural disasters, weather extremes, food and water insecurity, economic disruption, conflict and terrorism. Sea levels are rising, the Arctic is melting, coral reefs are dying, oceans are acidifying, and forests are burning. It is clear that business as usual is not good enough. And disasters linked to climate and weather extremes have always been a part of Earth's system, but they're becoming more and more frequent and intense. In fact, no continent is left untouched. And 90% of disasters are now classed as weather and climate-related disasters, costing the world economy $520 billion each year, and also pushing about 26 million people into poverty. It's a defining crisis of our time, and it is happening more quickly than we ever feared. So I have with me our panel, which will help us discuss how we can help create change. With me, we have Captain Sarabjit Parmar, a naval officer with 35 years of naval service. He's been a flyer in the Navy and a senior directing staff at the Defense Services Staff College. He's currently a senior fellow at the National Maritime Foundation, and areas of research that he's working with are Indo-Pacific security strategies, which include climate change and international law. I have with me on stage Mr. Atul Bagai, A career civil servant with the Government of India, he is now the country head for United Nations Environment Program's India office. UNEP is UN's leading global environmental body that sets the global environmental agenda. And he has led from the front to fulfill its mandate across climate crisis, chemicals, waste and air quality, environmental governance, resource efficiency, environment under review, health and productive ecosystems, and resilience to disasters and conflicts. And then I have Dr. Vibha Dhawan, the Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute, popularly known as TERI, who has been associated with TERI for almost 4 decades. She's played a key role in the establishment of revolutionary micropropagation technology park at TERI in collaboration with the Government of India. She also guides the activities of the DBT TERI Center on the integrated production of advanced biofuels and biocommodities. She successfully completed numerous international assignments, such as coordinator for the Asia Pacific Consortium on Agriculture Biotechnology, advisor to Director General, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, and others. She is the chair of the T20 Task Force 4 on Refueling Growth, Clean Energy, and Green Transitions, and a member of the Network's Strategy Council of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And she's been honored with a slew of prestigious awards in her field and has authored 6 books and over 50 publications. You'd agree that's quite a lineup we have for you here. To begin the morning, however, I would like to also start by wishing Mr. Atul Bagai a very happy birthday. Thank you for coming over on this special day for us and for you, made extra special. Thank you. Over to you, General Prashad.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You just heard the anchors, or rather the MC speak, and she spoke lovely things about the 3 panelists. But for me, she had nothing to say, except that everybody should know me. That's the greatest introduction she's ever done. But I don't blame her. It's simply because I have nothing and I don't understand much about the climate issues, and I'm pretty much a layman on this matter. So why I accepted to be a moderator on this is that, at least so I feel, that a very large percentage amongst us do not have any idea what the climate change is all about. And I'm one of them. The purpose of this particular discussion is to educate us and to inform as many of us who are possible to as to what exactly is involved in climate change and how is it affecting and what are the causes for getting it this far. But before I do that, I must also tell you today as to why this subject has been chosen as a part of this LitFest. My introduction is that I am the president of this club and therefore the so-called coordinator and curator of this thing, and why in my committee we chose this subject to be included. LitFests are held anywhere and everywhere these days. You have one in Jaipur, you have one in Lahore, you have many in India, you have one in Kasauli. And in 2017, we decided in this Vasant Vihar club to have a thing called the LitFest. So we had a first LitFest in 2017, held over here in physical form. We did a similar one in 18 and 19 and 20. Thereafter, the COVID took over, and 21 and 22 were done in virtual mode. And this after COVID is the first one we are doing now, which is now the 7th LitFest. What we discussed amongst our committee is exactly what we should be discussing in this LitFest. And we came to the conclusion, what is really troubling the world today? And so we coined the theme for this LitFest called Peace and Prosperity. And why peace? The question is, are we going through peace status today? Is the world at peace today? Are all the global organizations who discuss G20, Davos, BRICS, SAARC discussing security? And are they enabled to bring peace into this world? To me, the answer looked no. Prosperity, what does that prosperity mean? Is economic development. All these organizations which I just named are only objecting, their only objective is to bring some kind of economic stability, prosperity, better health care, better facilities for people. Is that really happening? It doesn't seem so. People talk about women empowerment. Yes, women empowerment goes up to the time when women are required for voting purposes. And soon thereafter, they are put to wherever they always have been. And I thought this was another subject which is very much related to prosperity and therefore women empowerment. And finally, everybody talks about the global climate change. There are many forums to discuss it. There are huge sums of money injected into these projects. And yet many of us don't really understand as to what exactly it means and what role we as individual members of the society need to do about it. With this as the background, we started this LitFest and the concept. And just for the information, and perhaps repetitive for some of you who are attending for the second or the third time, this particular session was this particular LitFest was inaugurated by Dr. Karan Singh. And when we spoke to him and heard the concept or the theme of this LitFest, he said, I would like to speak on this matter in a different form, which would be getting the Vedanta today into it. And he spoke about Vedanta, the relevance of Vedanta today, in the concept of the theme that we're having on the LitFest. That is the background. As far as the climate change, particularly today, is concerned, I have no idea what it means. I am here to sit down and learn from the experts and domain experts we've got here today. But I do know that if you look at the mountains, we are completely denuding the mountains, and you see what happens in Joshimath. You must have seen today's newspaper where glaciers are melting away. The water in Indus is reducing by about 7 or 10%. We keep hearing about the sea level rising and the fisheries and the other, what do you call it, seafood is all getting completely ruined. We throw plastics and things like that, which is killing the life of the sea. We also hear all kinds of things about the jungles being, or the forests being denuded, the wildlife being reduced. There are any number of issues that can strike a common man as to what exactly are we struggling with today. For that purpose, we have excellent domain experts, 3 of them. I will now hand over to them. What we will do, if it's acceptable to all of you, we'll give you about 10 to 12 minutes to make an initial presentation. And then we will open the house for questions and answers, because I think there are going to be more questions in people's mind than what they want to listen on a one-way traffic. One-way traffic they may have heard many times earlier as well. So ladies and gentlemen, try and enjoy this session. Let's see how much we can imbibe out of this very interesting session. I really am expecting that I'll be better educated in the subject once we finish with this presentation or this panel discussion. Thank you so much for coming here. I know it's a Sunday, but still some people who are genuinely interested. And perhaps since people are not interested, that's why there's climate degradation. So not many people seem to be really taking it seriously. Because if they did, like yesterday's economy was a subject of discussion yesterday, and a lot of people were interested in economy. I had a reasonable house here. But that's the reason, ma'am, why climate change is a problem, because people don't know what exactly they're stepping into. Would you like to come, ma'am?
Yeah, so very good morning to all of you, and to come on a Sunday morning and be here. I'm sure you're very much interested in this topic. Well, I'm sure you all are reading a lot. COP meetings, climate change, what is happening world over. And then sometimes it is why it is happening and what are the consequences. In fact, we started talking about climate change in almost, in the first meeting was in Stockholm when Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and that was the time that we started discussing that the global development is taking place, but perhaps it's not sustainable. And we cannot afford to move business as usual. We have to change, and we have to look more into the consequences of this development. Now, some of you must be thinking that, what is it? What is happening? And when we were children, then also in a way the atmosphere, that there were changes. Every year was not the same. But what is so serious today? And that is what I like to tell you. Like today is 5th of March and look at the temperature. It's so high already. It's not just the temperature. It is now, you must be reading in the newspapers that wheat crop may get reduced, or its impact on wheat may be as much as 40%. Why? Now, the reason for that is that, okay, you and I, we can afford to be in our houses, switch on the air conditioner. Maybe it will be 2 weeks earlier than the last year. But do we think about what is happening to millions of citizens on this planet and the plants, and how it is going to impact each one of us? And really speaking, I always say that each one of us is a contributor, and each one of us is going to get impacted. Now, let's first come to how each one of us is a contributor. And look back the kind of life we were leading, say, 2 or 3 decades before. Very few houses were centrally air conditioned. You will take care, you will have a room or 2 which were air conditioned, and in a way you will try to accommodate the entire family over there, because there are only 2 rooms which are AC. Today, everything is 100% air conditioned. You look at your cars, and we are going for bigger and bigger cars, and perhaps every member should have a car to his or her own disposal. What is it that we are burning there? We are burning fossil fuels, and they all emit what we call greenhouse gases. And it is both temperature as well as that the quality of gases is not good. What we are breathing all the time is really getting bad to worse. Perhaps 30 years back, if you talk to someone, young students, and they would like to go overseas, basically to have better job opportunities, but if you ask them today, they are not short of job opportunities in the country, but they say, I want fresh air for my child, and therefore either I should move to areas like Goa and Pondicherry, or I should settle in some country overseas. And I'm sure you all are also realizing in small little things, and since the change is so sudden, you actually don't take note of it, or you don't contribute to what is actually happening. Simple things like the beginning of winter for most of the citizens in Delhi is that they are going to have bad throat. It's bad air, and it's nothing but the bad air. And again, like someone was saying earlier also, we were growing rice. So why now it is the airflow? Yes, airflow is also making a difference. But the reason for airflow again is that we are cutting down trees and we are building tall buildings, and therefore they also put a barrier to the flow of the air. So therefore the air gets entrapped in the city, and then each one of us suffer because of that. Have you ever heard of floods in cities like Bengaluru? We did face that. Now, what was mentioned about that the melting of glaciers, and 15 years back it was, in a way, it was questioned, this study was questioned, that is not true. Now, melting of glaciers, how it's going to impact both the country and perhaps our international relations as well, because many of the rivers do flow to Pakistan. So it is not us who are stopping the water. It is basically that the water flow in the rivers is going to decline. Now, glaciers, they give you certain amount of water year after year. But what is also happening, that if the glacier melts, the amount of water that will come to the river will decline. And also, the glaciers, they don't melt, like it's not just the melting because of the sudden change in temperature or otherwise. You have glacier melts and those ice storms kind of a thing. And that has happened, that had killed many of our citizens in Uttarakhand. So it is a sort of that you suffer twice. And those communities which are living in Uttarakhand and other regions in the hills, they suffer, and you are also noticing that cloud burst, which earlier was once in a while kind of thing, it has become a routine. It will happen perhaps twice or thrice every year kind of thing. Who is responsible? And that is where I say each one of us is responsible. And I'll just touch upon Jyoti Mutt. It is not anything has happened there overnight. And someone was asking me, they said, we always had roads. So what has happened all of a sudden? Now, what is happening is that we all want to go to Char Dham Yatra. We want roads to be wider and wider. And it is an eco-fragile area. So therefore, you are disturbing the forests which are existing over there. We are taking cars, number of cars, and to accommodate us, there are more and more hotels which are coming up. And there is no proper mechanism at the moment, either for how do you treat the waste, and we, in a way, we take care that nature will take it care, and therefore we can simply put it back from where the water is extracted. So the soil becomes very soft, and thereafter, the communities over there, perhaps, who hasn't contributed to this, they are the one who had suffered. So our consciousness towards what we are using is perhaps decreasing. We feel very proud of that we have gone as a family to perhaps all the continents and all that. Have we ever thought about what are the GHG emissions? And because see, nature has a system to clean, but then within limits. We have oceans which fix carbon dioxide, but how much? And then over a period of time, because our population went on increasing and therefore more mouths to feed, more of agriculture productivity we required, and therefore agriculture, which any science student will say, or even those children will tell us that agriculture or plants take carbon dioxide and water and they give us glucose molecule and oxygen. So therefore, it appears to be a very clean activity, but actually it is not. Because what it's doing is, first of all, you are and green revolution, which started in 1970s, we moved towards highly intensive agriculture, and that called for applications of fertilizers, irrigation, pesticides, so that you get more yields. We required it, definitely, even if you do an audit today and you'll say that those were the technologies required at that stage. But then it is that what has happened is we are producing urea in factories, and it's a highly energy intensive process. So again, you use energy, and what comes out are the greenhouse gas emissions which pollute your environment. Then you transport this to far off places. Again, it is transportation and GHG emissions. You apply it, part of it goes to the plant, part of it further pollutes your water, and part of it goes to the air, further polluting it. So it's no more a clean activity, and what we need to move towards, and there are already some, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but there are technologies like nano urea and nano fertilizers which will soon be in the market. So there you are taking care of some of these things. So what I would like to say is that there are a lot of technologies available. Some of you, again, like I just saw today morning that there was one session perhaps on electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, they are great, but where are we generating electricity from? Is that a clean activity? And that is where you, again, another term which you must have heard, and we are moving towards that, is that of energy transition. So energy transition essentially means that the kind of energy what we are using, can that be little cleaner? And there are opportunities. India, of course, we were unfortunate in terms of petrol. There was no fossil fuel except for coal available with India. But fortunately, we are blessed with sunlight, and therefore the production cost of solar energy in India is not even 50% of that in Europe. So that gives you opportunity that with transmission improving, we can perhaps export energy as well. The other area is that of biofuels, and can we create biofuels at the village level? And there are opportunities. Energy transition at the rural level essentially means how do you make their lives more comfortable? What kind of energy can you give them? And the moment you make them self-sufficient in food and the processing side of food, improve their economy, that's the way India will grow. So there also we generate a lot of waste, which can either be converted into biofuel or the CNG, compressed natural gas, biogas plants, old concept, but now we have new technologies with the bottling plant and ensuring that villages also become self-sufficient for their energy needs. It's bound to grow. The economy is bound to grow further. And we have wind at some places, hydro plants you have already heard of. So one can go in a big way with those. And the most recent technology is that of hydrogen, on which India is eyeing at to become the major hub and also export energy from India. So in the end, what I would like to say, that it is good that we all have realized that we cannot afford the way we are living. Sustainability has to come. And in this sustainable development, we do have options, and India has the best scientists to develop technologies, to adopt technologies, and grow further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Just a word before I ask you to speak, Atul. You spoke about the fact that we are doing a session on the electric motors. We are also doing a session on the laboratory-grown diamonds. That also is perhaps related to somewhat of climate issues, because now the digging for diamonds may stop, which is denuding the earth of whatever many issues that are related with digging all over the world. So that's another subject that we are dealing with. We had a fantastic panel discussion on it yesterday, and the diamonds which are laboratory grown are on display in the club today. So that's another thing. So both our sessions are in some way or the other related to climate issues.
Thank you, and thanks for all your best wishes. And I requested Vibhaji to kick off these discussions because we couldn't have found a much better person than her with her kind of a background to put the science in very common terms which everyone could understand. For me also, it's a little difficult to understand science. I'm a history student, and being in environment for the last 25 years, I realized that there are so many other aspects that need to be looked at. And I think environmental governance works on a very basic principle of precautionary, which is called the precautionary principle. And I think most of us who are sitting here and outside, we really need to look at it with a lot of care, that we may not have proven science to say why the climate is changing. There are many skeptics even now. And it's strange that there are skeptics even now on climate change, because everyone, the 7 billion population faces the rigors of climate change on a daily basis. But even if there are people and scientists who think that the connection is not very well proven, environmental governance depends on a precautionary principle, that if you have some scientific knowledge and evidence that there is a problem which will lead to environmental damage, you start taking action. And Montreal Protocol, which is an international agreement, is a very good example of this. In 70s, there was a lot of skepticism about whether the chlorofluorocarbons impact the ozone layer. And there were a lot of industry people who didn't want to believe it. And there was some scientific evidence which said that there is a connection and it leads to skin cancers and leads to bad productivity. But the global community said that there is enough evidence for us to start taking precautions. Even today, there are many scientists who are working about a particular ozone depleting substance having some impact on human life. So had we waited all these 30, 40 years and no action would have been taken, we would have really damaged the ozone layer beyond redemption. So I think, as Vibhaji is saying, my main focus for what I'm going to say today is there is enough evidence to say that climate change is taking place. We see it all around us. You may think that the science doesn't prove it, but we are seeing, as General Saab also said, that there is a change taking place on a daily basis. So what you and I as individuals can do is the most important thing. And I think that individual action, to what Vibhaji in the end mentioned, is certainly a very, very important aspect for all of us to think together. Sustainable consumption and production is a very big area of work in environmental field. And I would feel sustainable consumption, which touches each and every individual, is also very, very important. We might say that the industry has to produce in a more environmentally friendly manner. Industry has to use greener methods. Industry has to do this and that. The governments have to bring in the policy. But I think also equally important is you and I, what can we individually do? For example, I carry a bottle of water like this, which means that I won't use this plastic bottle when I'm here. This is a very small measure, but you all, as also organizers of this literary festival, need to think, how do you make this festival green? How can you make this festival as a zero waste festival? How can you discard anything which is plastic or single use plastic? And I think once your mindset starts thinking like that, you will start contributing to this damage that's happening to the planet. I was seeing a TED talk recently of a young girl from Netherlands, I think. She was about 16 years old or 17 years old. She started the TED talk with a jam jar she brought to the stage and kept it on the table, and it had a little bit of plastic material inside. And she said this is her plastic use and waste for 2 years. She was able to collect her 2 years plastic waste, which she, as a personal consumer, created in that small jar. Can anyone of us here or anyone outside think of such a very innovative way of how to reduce my plastic footprint? She, of course, had to do it through a very rigorous and difficult method of creating things of daily use, which she used: toothbrush, toothpaste, facial mask, comb, whatever. From the morning till night, you can think of 600 things you use which would have plastic. So she had to go through that whole process to see what is it that she can replace it with, which does not create plastic. So I think that is the solution that we all need to look at personally, what we can contribute. And I think if we can 7 billion contribute to that, we would be able to address not only climate change, but also the plastic pollution and also the damage we are doing to the nature. I'll just close my remarks by talking about our Indian culture. When we get up in the morning and we get off the bed and our feet touches the earth, we apologize to earth that my feet have touched you, because earth is a very respectable thing in our culture. And that is something that we have to ingrain in ourselves. We have a very good Indian tradition of Atithi Devo Bhav, that God is, the guest is like a god, and we go out of a way. Our hospitality is very well known. And I would like to add one more principle to that: Prakriti Devo Bhav. If we can make nature, look at nature as God, I think half the battle is won. And I think individual action is so very important in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is exactly what I mentioned in the beginning, that most of us are very much a part of this issue and need to really be educated in a way we as individuals can contribute. Thank you so much for highlighting this issue. And friends, the other thing which I just wanted to highlight before I hand over to Captain Parmar: sea levels are rising, water in the rivers are reducing, the livelihood of fish and things are completely gone, oceans are full of plastics. We hear it every day on television and various shows. I just want to hear something from Captain Parmar to see as to how sea plays such an important role in environmental matters, and how exactly can we attack this issue and see how we can contribute towards a betterment.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here today morning amongst this very learned panel and, of course, a learned audience. The genesis of my being here is that captains, especially naval captains, do not refuse polite requests from generals, especially over a glass of whiskey one night before. So today, with a little bit of a hangover, I'm going to try and add my 2 bits to climate change. So a lot has been said by my learned panelists, and I just cover a few issues as that what I want to cover today is it's not only the health of you and me, but it's the health and the very survival of nations that is at stake. So you're having the whole population of the earth that is being impacted by climate change in some manner or the other. So just as a revision, as per the United Nations, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. We are seeing it today happening. These shifts may be natural over a long period of time, but due to human activities, especially since the 1800s, these activities have been the main driver of climate change. So you're looking at the time from, I think, the Industrial Revolution, where science was not up to the mark to decide what impact or future impact would these activities have. But today we have. And going by the temperature, the decade from 2010 to 2020 was perhaps the warmest, and the earth today is 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer as compared to the 1800s. But if you look at the weather today, it was windy and warm, and ma'am, you mentioned about the temperature increase. I think we're in for one of the hottest summers, and every day you may have a new record being sent to us as to this today is the warmest day or the coldest day or the windiest day, but it's not a very happy thing. Amongst the consequences of climate change, one is intense droughts are taking place. We have water scarcity, severe fires, rising flood levels, flooding. All of that is there. All these are interlinked. Where you have flooding in one area of the world, you have lack of water. And therefore, the security of the world is at stake, because the next battle or the conflict may be fought over food or water, not for mere sovereignty issues as we have been seeing it over the past 2 centuries, as I would say. But do we have solutions? There are solutions in the offing, some are being worked upon, and many climate change solutions can deliver economic benefits while improving lives and protecting the environment. So it's a delicate balance. Profit margins, survivability, the health of the human race, and the happiness quotient that most of us enjoy in today's world. And amongst them, there are global frameworks and agreements such as Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement and the Montreal Convention, as was mentioned. The 3 broad categories of action are, first of all, cutting the emissions, which is very important, and more importantly, adapting to climate impacts and financing required adjustments just to get into the balance of the order of life as we see it today. We can't go back in the past and change it, but we can adapt to where we stand today, and that is the measure of my points today. So let me elaborate a few points that are on my mind. So one is sea level rise, as General Prasad mentioned. Now various studies indicate a rise in sea levels by around 8 to 9 inches since the 1880s. 8 to 9 inches is a little less than a foot. So can you imagine, if you have the standard rise along the coast, how much of territory you are losing? The impact on the infrastructure, the impact on the coastal communities, the impact on everything which exists on the coastal states, especially for maritime nations. And India, do remember, has a coastline of 7,516 kilometers, which is a huge amount. Can you imagine the erosion of that land taking place? What happens to the growth of India? And that's just one example among most of the coastal states that I can give you. So here comes a term, that the very survival of island nations is today at stake. If the sea level rise continues, can you imagine that there are island nations that will cease to exist, perhaps in the foreseeable future? And that has given rise to a term which is called climate migrants. It's a very live issue today, and as per a World Bank report, there will be around 143 million climate migrants if the level of sea rise continues as it is today. 143 million. Where do these people go? Even if certain nations act as host nations and say that your people are welcome to come and live in our land, do remember that there will be impact for the host nations. There's going to be at the level of economics and at this level of society. The whole geopolitics, the whole societies will change if you have an influx of climate migrants. Just imagine that happening. It will add to the, it will impact the health of the nation as it grows, especially economic-wise. All those studies have indicated that reduction in greenhouse gases and robust development planning, as has been spoken about, and if it goes accordingly, then the number of climate migrants could be reduced to around 40 million. But that is still 40 million. That's a number to be considered. And even if the gas emissions were lowered, we are still looking at a sea level rise of around 16 inches by 2100. It is still going to happen. It's not going to stop. Hence comes the adaptability part, is that we need to accept this fact and try to get around it and settle for the lesser of the evils, or try to put things at stake. So 2019 study on global vulnerability to sea level rise and coastal flooded, and this is in the case of India, estimates that nearly 35 million Indians will be exposed to annual flooding by the year 2050. That is just 27 years away from today. And that number will grow to 51 million Indians by 2100. But this estimate is based on a 2010 census. We have crossed the population of China today. Therefore, these figures will have a marginal increase, if not a large one. And therefore, this study estimates that parts of the coastal regions that are currently home to 21 million Indians will be permanently inundated by several rise by the mid-century. And regions inhabited by nearly 38 million Indians will be inundated by the end of the current century. Where do these people go? We are going to see a forced migration from these coastal communities from the coast levels towards the hinterland. Again, how much of the hinterland can take this influx? We are in a city of Delhi. See the population of Delhi. Every day we have migrants who come in search of economic opportunities. Here we are forcing, climate change will force people, because of the loss of revenue, to look at other revenues, and that will add to the problems that cities and growing villages or growing cities and major metropolitans are facing. According to another recent global study, the annual economic losses due to coastal flooding in India could be anywhere between 1.5 to 2% of the annual GDP. For a country like India, who's slowly climbing the ladder to become the number 3rd economy in the world, this is going to have a major impact. These are things we need to get around. So even when we work at our own levels, as has been suggested by the panel, it will add each part, a drop of the ocean will be added, and we will be able to perhaps mitigate the economic losses that are about to come around the corner out here. Another aspect I'd like to
can we
elaborate
just,
upon.
we'll leave some time for question and answers. If
That's it. I'll just finish it off, is the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. Fishing migrants, due to the change in salinity and water temperatures due to the flooding, there will be a change in fishing, there will be a change in patterns, and IU fishing, which is actually the black market of fishing, is impacting many nations. But there are certain issues that are in force right now. One is CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. As on date, we have 31 nations as members and 8 organizations as partners. And the secretariat of the CDRI is in Delhi. So this is an organization that is looking at recognizing the vulnerability of island states, and a lot of studies have been carried out by the CDRI across the board, across the country, addressing the many issues which I have just covered. One more point is the Quad, which is Australia, India, Japan and the US. There are a number of Quad initiatives that have come about. One is on climate change, and there is something called QCHAMP, or Quad Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation Packages, which are in force and being worked out. And the recent Quad Foreign Ministers meeting that was held on 3rd March last week emphasized the need for looking at climate change. Last 2 points are Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. Now the IPOI is at the political level and the IONS is at the Indian naval level. Both look at climate change in a big way. So there are methods and there are certain organizations that are looking at this, and this is important. And there are linkages with them. So we are looking at it, but The problem is that there is a big gap between the developed nations and the developing nations. One nation cannot do it in all. We need to work together to address climate change. And that, I think, is the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's been a very illuminating presentation you made, and a lot of things that many of us didn't understand. Thank you so much for the entire panel. We are terribly behind time, but still, I think the audience need an opportunity to raise a few questions, and we'll try and see. Yes, up there, Sir Chand. Very brief questions, and we therefore be accommodating about 1 or 2 or 3 questions.
Okay, so my question is about the pollution in Delhi. The irony is all the decision makers, policy makers, the scientists all live here. And it's in their enlightened self-interest to address the pollution problem. So I'd just like to hear from the panel as to what is holding up this whole thing and why, and can we expect AQI levels to halve next winter?
Can we take a few questions together so that it will give more questions to come up? And yes, another question there. Yes, please. Yeah. We'll take some of these questions together.
Okay. I've worked in climate and energy for 35 years, and I'm pretty depressed about...
Just introduce yourself, please.
No, I'm just saying. So I'm speaking from a position of history. My question is, what happened to the Smart Cities program, and is there a Smart Cities low-carbon program being developed by the government, and also are our cities in the right place?
Yes, right there, sir, at the back. We'll take just one more question, then get the panel to respond.
Good morning, everybody. I must thank the panel for the excellent presentation. Thank you very much and for enlightening us. Now, my question is directed to Ms. Dhawan. You will recall that our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, during the climate summit held at Glasgow, he had announced that India would achieve about 50 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity by 2030. Then secondly, he had said that we will achieve 50% of our total energy requirement through non-renewable energy sources. And then he had said that, along with that, he had said that zero non-fossil fuel by 2070. So I feel that how Indian government is going to meet these targets, I feel they are very tall targets and in my mind cannot be achieved. The second question sir, I have is, the major challenge as far as the renewable sources of energy are concerned is the high initial cost of the project.
Okay.
A solar plant with about 4.5 gigahertz capacity would cost, with the 18 or 20% efficiency only, would cost about 16 crores. And similarly, a wind
Your point taken, sir. Your point taken. Yes.
Yeah, wind system will create about...
Let's get the answers from, because they've got the question.
So my question is that how is the government going to offset this?
Okay.
Unless the government steps in and to offset this, I don't feel there's going to be any big takers for this.
Absolutely. Let's hear the answers.
Associated with this is the high cost.
So we will not get time to get the answers. We will not get the time to answer the questions if we fill with the question. Vebaji, would you like to respond to some of them?
She'll take the last one first.
Well, the commitments of the Prime Minister at Glasgow, in a way, they are well reflected in this budget and in the past also. We are talking about blending of ethanol. We are ahead of time. We have achieved that. And you rightly mentioned, like, there are two things. First of all, what is government? Government consists of each one of us. It is like, what are we doing? Are we going for rooftop solar? And it is not that expensive. There are subsidies being offered. And ultimately, it is also the new energy conservation bill, which became effective from 1st of January this year. That is, in larger buildings, in larger industries, 50% has to be renewable. So therefore, what was voluntary is gradually becoming mandatory. And it is also, you must have heard many of the companies, they are promising, while the government promises net zero by 2070, most of the companies, many companies I'll say, they are between 2030 and 2050, they are setting that target for themselves. So it is on the way. The point which you raised about capex, that is a very important one. The initial investments are very high. And those are the negotiations which are happening at COP. Where is the money? Because you need initial money to set those renewables. But at the same time, there are investors, and it is that you don't have to invest. It is offset against the energy that you generate. So that is what is happening. And the other question which was raised was regarding, will next year be 50% less than the pollution levels we face this year? I'll say one can try, but it's very difficult to achieve, because there also it is each one of us. Are we ready to move? Are we ready to say next year, during this time, I'm not going to use my car. I'll use public transport. If I'm not going to be partner, and I'll say what difference it makes by each of my family member driving a separate car, then don't expect clean air either.
Yeah, I think Vibhaji has hit the nail on the head. I was going to give a very blunt answer. No, it will not happen next year. It's a long battle. It will take 10 to 15 years. So we need to really gear up for that. And as she rightly pointed out, we all need to work together to do it. It's not the job of the government only or the industry. As consumers, and as I said, sustainable consumption is really the key to change. And on the smart cities, meaning I'm not from the government, I wish there was someone from the government. I see my senior colleague Anoop here, who would be in a very good position to answer that. But from our perspective, we work closely with the government. There are efforts being made. Smart cities are being looked at. In fact, the Prime Minister made a public speech yesterday, I think, where he was talking of climate resilient cities, clean cities, zero waste cities. So that the ambition is there, the policy direction is there, but it takes a lot to make that. There are efforts being made. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not from the government, but I'll still add a bit on smart cities. A very good initiative, and many cities are coming forward. And Terry is also involved, because smart city essentially means that less of energy usage and zero waste, kind of, that you are not dumping anything into it. You might be aware there is, because see, green building movement is taking place, and Terry has also done a lot of work. We also have a certification system called GREHA. And it is basically, it is wrong to think that green is expensive. It is not. Because the building, a well-designed building can have saving of as much as 45% of the energy needs. And therefore, it repays for your investment. At the same time, it's far more comfortable for you. And of course, now there are standards, and many industries and even at household level, people are coming forward to go green as much as possible.
Thank you. Captain Parmar, would you like to respond to any of the questions?
Points have been covered.
Points have been covered. Well, thank you so much. We are terribly behind schedule. And I'm sure the audience wanted to have more interaction, but time is always a constraint. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. May I please call upon Mr. Anil Bhargav to present the mementos? Mr. Anil Bhargav? It's a very interesting thing that you talked about air conditioning. It's become so stylish for people to say we only want 16 degrees and 18 degrees and how we contribute to it. Mr. Bhargav. Captain Sarabjit Singh Parmar. Thank you so much. Dr. Vibha Dhawan. The effort is only this much. Come on, let's do this. Thank you so much.